Hey there, it's Phoenix Gira. Today, Michael and I are creating beef bone broth, and we're going to show you the process from beginning to end. So hang on to your seats, we're about to start.
Okay, so first step of bone broth is you actually have to roast the bones. Now, I walked into the butcher and I said, do you have any soup bones? And he said, I do. How many do you want? And I said, a bunch. And he got me a bunch. Last night, we ate ribs for dinner. And, well, we ate the meat of the ribs, but not the bone of the ribs. And I said to myself, self, and I answered myself, yes. We're going to go ahead and cook those for bone broth as well. But because those bones have already been roasted, they don't need to be re-roasted. That's done. So part of the bones will not go in the oven. Part of the bones will go in the oven. We'll take care of that momentarily. So you can see I have a beat up old pan. Doesn't need to be fancy. This is the gross one. This is the one we use to make bone broth.
Do not use my cookie sheet.
Because, yes, Jira gets mad at me if I use the good ones. Even though she's going to eat the bone broth. As you can see, I'm using parchment paper. You don't have to use parchment paper. It just makes cleanup easier. So you just lay that down, then you lay the bones out. Ooh, that's a prime rib bone right there. Look at that bad boy. That's not crazy. And then you just sort of lay out the other ones. There's just a whole bunch of teeny tiny little bones. And it doesn't much matter what bones, I mean, you just want bones.
But they are all beef bones.
Yes. We just stack all the pieces in here. And because I'm not specifically trying to cook them, per se, it doesn't need to be particularly fancy. They just all need to be on the cookie sheet. That's all. So I'm stacking them up against each other and whatever, that's fine. It really doesn't matter. You just want them all here. So the next step is salting the bones. Some recipes call for salting, some recipes don't. Every time I've not salted the bones, I have been disappointed with the outcome. So I salt the bones. As you can see, these are the raw bones that I got from the butcher block today. These are the remainders of the ribs we ate for dinner last night, which were scrumptious, by the way. Salting, really it's just like salting any meat. It's very difficult to over salt uncooked meat.
And what kind of salt is this?
We use kosher salt, coarse. You could use any coarse salt. Some people like sea salt, and that's fine. Salt the absolute bejesus out of your bones. Bone broth is by nature a very bland food. You could actually roast your bones with vegetables. You could roast your bones with carrots and celery, onions, garlic. Once you've got them good and salted, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the bones and you're gonna put them in your oven and you're gonna roast them, as I said. The temperature should be 400 degrees. The time should be 1 hour. Again, the purpose here isn't to cook the bones, because I'm not going to eat the bones. It's to begin the process so that they more readily release the minerals and the vitamins and the other nutrients that we're trying to get into the bone broth. And this is the best way to do that. So, without further ado, it really doesn't matter which rack. I've got it in the center because, well, that's where I had it the last time I cooked something. Put it in there, 400 degrees, and the thermometer says that's what it is. There you go. It's been an hour. First things first, let's get the bones out of the oven. Now, as you can see, they are nicely cooked. There's going to be all manner of yumminess in this soup. Just set that there for right now.
Delicious.
Look at those ribs. Yummy. Yes. I'll get that out. This is what we're doing. I use the Instapot. Now, you don't have to use the Instapot specifically. You can use any pressure cooker. I've done this in a slow cooker. The trick on a slow cooker is it takes about 48 hours, and I'm wildly impatient. So we're not going to do that. In addition to the Instapot itself, I like to use this lovely silicone basket for capturing the bones. Makes it far easier to take the bones out later. And it just fits in there, like so. Wow. Obviously we got the bones. The other thing you see behind me is a pot of now boiling water. The reason I boiled it is because in order for the pressure cooker to work, it has to be hot. Well, rather than waiting for the pressure cooker to make it hot, I'll start with hot. We're going to start by putting the rib bones in from the other night. So there's really no organization or special way to put in the bones. I literally just dump them in there. This way I'm not carrying drippy, meaty bones across the kitchen and making a mess that then Jera will insist I clean. Can you imagine such a thing?
The nerve.
I know. Because we're using a pressure cooker, it doesn't matter that the water doesn't completely cover the bones, and it won't. You'll see that momentarily. So you can see it's very full. We use a tablespoon, and it's very important that you use this properly. We use a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar.
Do you want to tell them what happened last time?
Yeah, so the last time I did it with way more water, so I used more vinegar. Didn't use apple cider vinegar. Didn't stop at 3 tablespoons. Had to throw the soup out and start over. It was no bueno.
Now, a moment ago, I thought you said only 1 tablespoon.
1 tablespoon, yes.
Okay. All right.
I didn't stop at 3 tablespoons when I had twice as much water. I don't know how many
Gotcha.
tablespoons I put in. So the reason you add vinegar is because it adds a little bit of acidity to the water, which will help. It will help pull the nutrients out of the bones, and that's the entire purpose of this. I don't just want water that's, soaked up some bone. I want it to actually be infused with the calcium and maybe some iron and some other trace minerals that humans need to survive.
I can really smell that vinegar, and you only added the 1 tablespoon.
Yeah, so you can imagine what happened when I introduced somewhere in the neighborhood of half a cup the last time. You can see why it did not taste well. It was...
And the house smelled
everything.
interesting.
It was awful. Okay, so it's 6 cups of boiling water, so I just boiled 6 cups of water. Wow, crazy. And then you just pour it in there. So, in this case, I hooked the basket together. It's ready to go. It's got the hot water. It's got the vinegar. It's got the bones. If you were of a mind to put vegetables or whatever in your bone broth, you would put it here just like I did, except you put in vegetables in addition to bones. So you'd probably use half as many bones. So the next thing is we are just going to put it in the Instapot, which I have over here. So again, you don't have to use this particular pressure cooker. It's the one I own. You put it in, you lock the lid down, you make sure that you have the valve sealed. And again, it depends on your particular brand which direction that is. In this case, sealed is twisted to the back. Then you tell it to pressure cook. Pressure level is going to be high, and the time is going to be 2 hours. And I know you're thinking, Michael, you said you were impatient. 2 hours is a long time. It beats the 2 days that not pressure cooking takes. So we'll go with this. That's it. I'll see you in 2 hours. Okay, welcome back to our kitchen. This morning, we're gonna finish the bone broth. So, doing the bone broth isn't particularly time consuming, but it does take up a lot of clock time. It takes an hour to roast the bones, it takes 2 hours to pressure cook the bones, it takes another half hour, 45 minutes for that pressure to come off, and it takes time to clarify it. You're gonna spend the better part of 4 hours doing this. But you're not actively doing things for the entire 4 hours. So, plan it out before you start. Otherwise, you'll wind up in a situation like I was in last night where I got it all cooked and ready to go, and it's 1 freaking o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to clarify at 1 o'clock in the morning. I actually have to work it during the day. So, fast forward to today. I just left it in the Instapot. It'll be fine. It was sealed, it's okay overnight, it cools off, whatever. So the first thing I did this morning, I got up, I set the Instapot to slow cook, and I let it slow cook for about 2 hours. That gets it hot again. It does need to be hot in order to clarify it, and I'll show you why that is momentarily, but I'll describe why that is now. It clarifies better when it's hotter because it runs through things, but also it separates the fat that naturally was going to be in it from the soup. Having sat in an Instapot with bones that had bits of meat and fat and so forth on them, the soup now has, well, chunks. It's not broth, it's actually soup. And I don't want soup, I want broth. So we'll take it off of the Instapot and we'll clarify it. We'll start by pouring it into this gravy separator. We use the gravy separator because it'll actually separate the oil from the broth. Broth will be at the bottom because, of course, oil floats. And then I can pour off the broth. I will pour off the broth into this jelly strainer. You can use anything, a cheesecloth of any variety will work. Mostly what you're trying to do is capture the finer bits. I like the jelly strainer, and the reason I like the jelly strainer is because it comes with this setup here. It's just a ring and some legs, but honestly, it makes the whole process easier. You set it over the jar, you pour it through the jar, it runs through the jar, filtered and ready to rock and roll. You're obviously going to need some jars. We, of course, like the standard, we use ball, but it's in a standard mason type jar. Doesn't really matter wide mouth or normal mouth. I like wide mouth. You can use normal, whatever you have.
Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you have in that other one that looks like something's already in it?
This one here?
Yeah.
This is done product. I'll show you that in a minute. Don't jump ahead of me.
Well, it's going to ungellify.
It'll be fine. The last thing I like is a canning funnel. It gives you a wider mouth, so I will actually put it underneath here. So real quick, let me show you a finished product. This is the last of the bone broth that I made last week. As you can see, it's rather thick. It's pretty viscous. It will gel, and it's supposed to gel. Believe it's the... No, I'm not even gonna BS my way through it. I don't know what nutrient makes it gel. I know that proper bone broth should gel. I also know that if you overcook it or cook it for too long, it will stop gelling and it will be soft all the time. This is at its very end, and it has been in and out of the fridge enough that it's no longer as gelled as it ought to be. That's one of the reasons why you'd rather do all 4 hours back to back. It won't hurt this bone broth that we made. It would be better had we started at 10 o'clock yesterday morning. I would have been done by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're opening it for the first time, do take care. Even if it's depressurized, it will blow steam in your face, and it kind of seals itself down. You can see in there, bones and soup. The inner sleeve of the cooker is going to be hot, so put on some gloves. I take it out. Now I'm going to come over here to the sink real quick, because I'm not going to keep the bones in the soup. It makes it heavier and more awkward. So I'm just going to pull the entire liner out. See how clever that was?
I love that.
Isn't that awesome? The bones are all wet, which means there's extra broth still cooking here. So I'm going to set, most of the bones on this cookie sheet.
I'm going to eat that one.
On the floor. Very, very simple. I typically do this over the sink so I don't get shouted out for making a mess, but that would be awkward for video purposes. So if I make a mess, it's not my fault. I'm just saying. You have now a pan full of lovely, lovely broth. And you will want, again, your sleeve is hot, so you will definitely want gloves to handle this. And yes, I used 2 different gloves. This one has really good grip. This one has waterproof qualities. So you just pour it off. You want to pour it off actually relatively quickly because it will, you know, dribble and make a mess. But you don't want to be so fast that you pour off too much and then spill everywhere. So there's a bit of a balance that I completely missed.
Oh man, I'm ticked off.
Yeah, I knew you would be. I need a paper towel. The next step is literally the clarification process. So we'll take our strainer and our funnel, already set on a bottle. And the strainer, as I mentioned, is just a jelly strainer. It's got a nice cheesecloth type bag. Makes it very, very simple. You can use just a piece of cheesecloth. I've done that. I found this easier because I'm not having to, as I said, fight. The cheesecloth doesn't try to go into the soup and so forth. This just makes it a little less messy. So here we go. Just pour it off. And again, you want to pay attention to how much you pour. The jar will hold about a quart. Conveniently, the gravy separator holds about a quart. So there you have it. But you want to pay attention, as you note, the layer of fat is getting lower and lower, and you don't want to pour the fat into the soup. You just want the soup in the soup. With that. When you start seeing the fat get to the opening, which starts there, you stop. And you let the soup pour off the rest of the way. And it will. Drain into the jar. Oh, this is going to be fabulous.
It looks pretty good.
Yeah.
It looks darker than the last one.
It is darker than the last one. So yeah, let me explain to you why this looks darker than the finished product that we already have. The last time we cooked it, I used way too much vinegar, and I had to throw a whole batch out. Well, the bones were fine, and the bones can be reused at least once. So I reused them. And so the original soup would have been this dark, except it tasted like vinegar, which, not yummy. It was this much yummy. So we threw that out and got rid of it. So what that did though is it made the broth we did get much, much lighter, much, much thinner. Which isn't the end of the world, but it's also not ideal. So I poured off the last of the contents from the inner sleeve of the Instapot into the gravy separator. If you pour in separate pours, you'll want to, as I did, where I had to pour off the pot and then pour off more of the pot, you'll want to make sure the second time that you don't have any fat in the spout. I had some fat in the spout, so I used the stopper to push it all back up. As you can see, the spout is now empty. When I pull the stopper out, all we will get is soup in the spout. There you go. Look at that, only broth. The fat has stayed up here where you want it. Okay, so then we finish pouring it off. Now again, you'll want to take care at this stage because you don't want to overfill the bottle. And it's surprisingly easy to do. Okay. Oops. This is where it can get a little messy. Let's do that. Drip it over.
I have a question.
I have an answer.
I noticed that there are those, what do you want to call them, hooks on the end.
If I was straining it not into jars directly, but straining it into the gravy separator, I could put the feet on it just like this. But they obviously rotate, so I could turn them inward and I could set them on the bottle. And then they can't move around. The problem with that is then you're straining from much, much higher. Well, I make a mess enough without making extra reasons to make a mess, so I'm not gonna do that. So a little bit of soup left, or a little bit of broth left, a little bit of fat left, so we're just gonna pour it off into the second bottle. This is gonna be fabulous, fabulous bone broth. Fantastic. So that's pretty much what you do to make bone broth. It's, as I said, it's a relatively simple process. It takes about 4 hours from start to finish. I find mason jars just the easiest to work with. They store nicely, and the soup itself will store not necessarily indefinitely because it is not canned, it's just poured in.
About how long will it last in the fridge?
You know, I think we've probably had it upwards of 2 weeks in the fridge. The problem with that question is that we like our bone broth. I make a bone broth. Well, this is the second bone broth I've made in 7 days. So I will be making this regularly. The good news is the bones themselves can be reused. I will likely buy some new bones, just another small package, add them to the old bones, and just start cycling out.
So you said something about using the last bones twice. Could you literally use them if you got new bones to add in with the old bones? Could you use it a third or a fourth time?
Well, my opinion, and this is opinion, just my opinion now, when you look at the bone broth that's in the fridge, it's obviously much thinner than this bone broth, and that matters. This is going to have more flavor, this is going to have more nutrients. The color indicates the level of nutrients, to be quite honest. So this is going to be a healthier or more healthful, I guess is the proper way to say it, more healthful soup than that is. It's also probably going to be tastier. So if we just use those bones that we used before just a second time, what we'll get is very thin soup, not the end of the world. But if I add some new bones to that old set, I can reuse, and then I will get nice, rich broth and reuse some bones. What I'll do when I buy a new set of bones is I'll throw away the rib bones that are at the bottom of that pile. As I mentioned, when you're done, you seal it, you throw it in the fridge, you let it sit. It will gel in typically about 24 hours. It will be fully gelled. And then you just scoop out the amount you want, heat it, put whatever you want in it, and eat it. So that's making bone broth in Phoenix Jera's kitchen. Funny that it's her kitchen and I'm doing all the work. We'll have to talk about that later. Anyways, we appreciate you coming. We appreciate you watching the video. I've had a good time. I hope you've found this at least somewhat entertaining or interesting or insightful. Either which way, we thank you for being here, truly. If you found this helpful, please hit the like and the subscribe. Watch for other videos, and we'll be back another time.
All right, here is the final product of the beef bone broth next to the prime rib. So when you look at the beef broth from this view, it looks like it's just, liquid, but it isn't liquid at all. I'll show you right now. It is actually in a gelled form. So, sorry for the glare there. Let's see if I can get it without, see how it's starting to kind of pull away from the jar? There it is. And that's the way you want it to be. I'm gonna put it into this bowl. Nope. There we go, maybe. There it is. That's what it's supposed to look like. And it's this nice, dark, rich color. And I'm going to heat this up so that it's very hot. And then I will put bits of this prime rib into it. I don't want to put the prime rib in to start and then heat it, or it will cook the prime rib much more than I want it to. If this is hot, like super hot, and you drop your pieces of whatever meat you want to use into it, it will warm that meat enough for you to eat it as if it had been heated up with the broth. So I'm going to do that here in just a moment. I'm going to heat this up and I'm going to add some of this in and I'll show you what that looks like. As a side note, this is the other jar we have. Everything that we did created 1.5 jars. And we're going to be able to use the same bones again to make another 1.5 jars. And if we do not have another set of raw bones to go with it, the color will be a little lighter, but it will still be delicious. Oh, the microwave just went off. Yay! Alright, here it is. This is the beef bone broth, heated up nicely. And this is a slice of the prime rib that Michael cut a little thinner than he meant, so it's going to be perfect for this soup. So I'm just going to take it and drop it in. Now you see how rare this is. When I put it in here, however, it will begin to cook it. I will not reheat this, and this is very hot. I also put in the bits of fat because that will start to melt in there and add even more flavor to the soup that I'm creating. But all of that meat is cooking as it's sitting inside the broth. Here it is, a little close-up view with the prime rib in there. See, it's heating it and cooking it, but it's not turning it completely well done, which is good because I don't want it well done. Doesn't that look delicious? Let me see if it is. Oh my gosh. That is amazing. I highly recommend that you do your bone broth the way Michael showed and cook your prime rib the way Michael showed. All right, that's it. Give it a shot. Hey there, it's me, Jira, and Michael and I are creating bone.
There we are. And actually cook your bone broth with bone broth. Bleh. Take 2. I will pour the fat or the. As you can see, the spout is now empty when I pull this. Oh, as you can see, the spout is now. Because we're pressure cookering or cooking.